Are you or someone you know getting married? Or maybe you just need a sweet treat to answer that sweet tooth of yours. Remember, the Cupcake Company is the place to go on 950 North Phoenix Road in Medford. They have an array of cupcake selections to meet every delicious desire you may have. Check them out on Facebook under the Cupcake Company. Whether it be a wedding, engagements, or just because to brighten up the office, the Cupcake Company is the place to go. For lunch specials, again, make sure you call them at 541-772-5511. The Cupcake Company, fulfilling all of your sweet needs. Thank you so much for joining us on Other People's Shoes today. Of course, you know I'm your host, Neil Matthews. Want to take a few moments, just really quick before the show starts, to let you know our show today, that's right, January 29th, is our show's birthday. Our show turned 1 year old today, and we couldn't be happier. Want to take a few moments, thank my wife. She's amazing, patient, kind, loving, super hot. I'm getting in trouble for that one. My daughter, she is so patient. She is just been so patient throughout this whole process and understanding when dad needs to record and we have to adjust things and schedules have to adjust to do interviews. My family has been very supportive. Also, without Garrett, this show probably doesn't go as well as it does. Garrett has been an amazing executive producer. Couldn't do this show without him. He does so much stuff behind the scenes. Guys, it'll blow your mind. I'm not an easy person to work with, but I also want to thank you. I want to thank each and every single one of you. I wish I could shake your hand, maybe give you a high five, fist bump for downloading this show, listening to the show, sharing this show with your friends, family members, or coworkers. So, guys, thank you so much for the support this last year. We're blown away. Humbled is a word that comes to my mind right now. We are very humbled by the fact that we get to do this each and every week and that you've invited us into your life. I would just ask for the continued support. Continue to share this show. Continue to love us, and as we do likewise, loving you with finding amazing guests as we get into their shoes each and every week. Just remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Remember that. If you remember nothing else about this show, remember that phrase. And guys, without further ado, we have a great show for you. And here we go.
Perspectives change with broken strings and worn out souls. Years ago and some with wings. Some are old, some undersold. To grow we need to rely on and try on some other people's shoes. Some other people's shoes.
Welcome in to Other People's Shoes. Of course, you know I'm your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining us this week. We have a special guest for you today, and I know you guys are probably thinking, wow, you have a special guest every week. Because in my mind, every guest is special. Let's be clear on that. So help me welcome in. He's the member of the band Incandescent. If you're wondering about them, definitely do a little Google research. We'll, of course, link it in our show notes. But it's a band you definitely want to check out. They have toured internationally. They're also from right here in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm going to get into the guest, and I'm going to let him introduce his bandmates to you. But we just have our guest today. He is, of course, the vocalist and guitarist. They've been on great tours that you've probably heard about. Creation Festival, Spirit Festival Northwest, Spirit Fest Texas, Dove Fest, we'll get to that in a second, Sun Fest, High Voltage Worship Fest, a lot of fests, by the way, a lot of festing going on in these bands. They've toured with great names, and you probably heard of this guy, Toby Mac, maybe. Show of hands, my hands up. Third Day, Peter Furler from the Newsboys, Cutlass, Ryan Stevenson, Colton Dixon, and so many more. Help me welcome my guests. Andrew. Andrew, how are you?
Man, I am doing so good. How are you doing, my friend?
So, Andrew, tell me your bandmates, because I didn't want to butcher names, and I'm really bad with names sometimes, so I skipped over those. But who are the bandmates that make up Incandescent?
Yeah, so with including myself, there was 4 other guys. We had Ryan Armstrong, who was our lead guitarist and music director. Colin Johnson, who was rhythm guitar and kind of an auxiliary player. Shane Collins, bass guitar. And then Zach Wright was our drummer.
Wow, that was awesome. It's almost like you've done that a few times, right? On stage, probably.
Yeah, the intros were a little different on stage, but
Yeah, we didn't have those to play, but we are going to play a little sample of some of your stuff at the end of the show, so stay tuned for that. But you and I met in kind of this weird sort of way. You're at the Dub Fest down here in Medford, because you're not in Medford. You're actually in the Idaho area, right?
yeah, I currently live and work and do music in North Idaho, kind of the Coeur d'Alene, Spokane area.
Nice. We love that. And so you and I met in this Dub Festival, and so we're kind of talking, we're interacting, and then you say that your home ministry is Real Life Ministries, right? At least at that time.
Yep, and it still stands true today. I'm a member at Real Life.
That's awesome. And so what's weird about it is our community pastor where I go to church is from Real Life. And so that's kind of how we had that like small world, small valley connection, really.
Yeah, it was really cool to see. It's Bob Dilley, right?
It is Bob Dilley. That is correct. Yeah, absolutely. So it's awesome.
He's a great guy.
He is a great guy. So there we are. So Andrew, we got to get this most important question out of the way, and that's this: what size shoes do you wear?
It depends on the kind of shoe. If it's kind of a casual shoe, like a 9.5. If it's more of an athletic shoe, a 10, somewhere in there.
And is there a certain brand or style that you love more than another?
Yes. If I'm going for kind of the cool band guy look, it's always going to be Vans. If I'm doing anything else, it's usually Adidas, like walking or running shoes.
I like the Vans look. That's a good look. So we'll imagine you're wearing your Vans today, right?
I am.
That's good.
Yeah.
So we don't even have to imagine. That's great. So Andrew, I'm curious about this. Like, when did you first thought to yourself, or maybe had this epiphany come to you? I want to be in a band. Because right? I know as a kid, I've looked up to people on stage and people with guitars and been in the youth circle, obviously, and seen people in bands. And I'm thinking, when did they get their start?
Yeah, that actually takes me back quite a long ways. The first memory that I have of that, I'm not exactly sure what year it was, but I was a young guy, maybe 12 or 13. And we had a Franklin Graham crusade that came up to Spokane, and they were here for 3 or 4 days, and they had great Christian acts, that played, and then Franklin would get up and deliver the gospel. And I remember that we went to that every single night that they were here, and I got introduced to so many awesome bands. And one band in particular stood out to me, and that was Third Day. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I love what those guys are doing. How do I do that? And then to follow that up, I was a young musician at the time. I was learning guitar and trying to figure all that out. And my favorite Christian artist at the time was a guy named Stephen Curtis Chapman. And so not long after the Franklin Graham Crusades, I got surprised with tickets to one of his concerts and went there and had the exact same experience. I went, whoa, like, I'm all in for this. How do I do that? And so I think that's what started my journey of trying to figure out what it would look like to start a band and become a musician. And I think those two slices of history were kind of the launch pad for what I'm doing today.
Well, I've never met Stephen Curtis Chapman personally, but he is a phenomenal guitar player. Just phenomenal. And so I think you're obviously following in some good footsteps there. And Mac Powell, actually, I think at one of those Dub Fests, and you guys might have been there, may not have been, but I actually ran into him in the dark. They were doing a dark set where they were doing kind of more of an acoustic thing. And I literally got pushed by Mac Powell. So I'm not mad at him. I've forgiven him, but he did kind of push me out of the way. I might have been in the way. So that's my Mac Powell story. But I love that
so
too.
Funny.
Is that okay? How's that funny?
I actually have a Mac Powell story too. So the first time that we ever played with Third Day, it was an outdoor festival. And of course, we kind of opened the show, and then Third Day closed it. And by the time it was done, it was, 10:30, 11 at night. And we're packing up, getting ready to head out. And all of a sudden, this like black hooded figure just appears out of nowhere, coming over to our merch booth. And he comes over and he's like, "Hey, my name's Mac. I just wanted to say you guys did an excellent job." And he proceeded to shake my hand and wish us well. And then just as like quickly and silently that he entered the frame, he just kind of disappeared. And I was all under the cover of darkness. So kind of funny how those stories line up.
That is funny. I now want to go find Mac Bout and ask him about his hooded alter ego. You know, that's a funny story. I like that. So,
yeah.
So Andrew, how has your vision maybe been changed in life now that you've been in this band, and how has life been changed for you?
Oh gosh, man, life has been turned upside down on me in the last couple of years. When we started, definitely like a headstrong, kind of boisterous young man who, was really excited and naive to the things of the world, especially the entertainment world, and much less the Christian entertainment world. And so kind of went into it with a lot of ambitions and, thought I knew everything at the time. And in the years since, you kind of go through a lot of humbling experiences and realize, oh, you don't actually have it figured out. And the more that you progress through it, your identity starts to change from like, oh, hey, I'm this band guy and everybody should appreciate me, to, wow, there's so many other people who are way better at what we do than I do. And I'm just humbled to be in their, kind of in their sphere. And I think the biggest thing for me that's changed is, rather than, kind of being headstrong and boisterous and young and kind of a little bit of a know-it-all, I'll admit it, back then I was definitely that way, to more of a sponge, and just kind of soaking up everything that's around me, whether it was working with other songwriters or producers or tech people. Tech is a huge part of my world and life. And just becoming like just someone who gleans information and tries to become more of a well-rounded person. I think that's one thing that's changed. The other thing is, within my own identity, not being defined by what I did, but actually being defined by who God says that I am. That's been a big transition in my life. And of course, you have to live through the experiences that kind of take you on that journey from point A to point B. But I think, just offhand, I think those would be the two things that kind of stand out to me over the journey of the last 10 or 11 years.
Wow, you mentioned being humbled, right? I don't know about you. My hand is not up when I hear let's figure out how to be humble. Can you think of a moment where you're like, man, that really maybe humbled you personally? Do you have that moment?
Oh gosh. Yeah, there was a traveling festival that we were part of. It actually had a different name in every city, but we were, contracted to play it. But also, one of the ways that we ended up on gigs is we also provided some audio support for opening bands, or some of the middle bands. And we got hired for this thing, and went out to the first date somewhere in, I think it was southern Idaho, Boise or Salt Lake City, something like that. And got there thinking that we had our game plan in place and that, we've got our act together. And then wouldn't you know it, everything just falls apart. There's not time to do the things that we were anticipating to do. The other talent that we're working with weren't necessarily impressed with what we were doing. It kind of just turned into amateur hour for us. And then of course we're kind of the bigger regional band who's opening for the big guys, and they're seeing us kind of fall on our faces. And I think we went into that not necessarily with an arrogance or a pride, but definitely thinking that we had the tools to pull it off. And then when everything started falling apart, you kind of realize, oh gosh, there's so much more to this that we didn't factor in, or we didn't think about this, or we didn't think about that, we didn't think about how this one circumstance could affect another. And so it was just really a humbling experience. And to top it all off, the guys that we admire, I think Mercy Me and Matthew West were kind of the big acts on this run. Their guys are also watching us, and their crew guys are like, you know, who are these guys? And so that's one that kind of jumps out at me right now. I'm sure there's a lot of others if I took a step back and started thinking about it. But I just remember feeling so defeated in that moment, and not feeling worthy of the position that we had been entrusted with. But the cool thing is, God ended up working that out, over the course of the time that we were doing that run of shows. But I just remember the first couple days were just absolutely humiliating. But over the course of everything that I've done and we've done as a band, I think there's been a mantra that we've created, and it's, you always have to do something wrong at least one time in order to learn from it and make sure you don't do the same mistake again. And then also kind of the classic one, it's always better to try and fail than to not have tried at all. So even though there's a lot of humbling experiences that have, kind of come along with doing what we did, there was a lot of growth that came out of it. And, at the end of the day, it made us better musicians, made us better people, better tech guys. And so we're better for it, but we had to, kind of fight through a couple of those little seasons, in order to get to where we're at today.
That's incredible. And first off, thanks for being vulnerable in that regard. I don't want to say that was awesome that happened, but just awesome that you're able to share that and be that vulnerable about it. I really receive that and respect that for sure. By the way, I'm just curious on this one. Do you know the largest concert ever to be held, like numbers wise of people?
I don't. If I was to guess,
I Googled this. So yeah, I was just curious if you knew this. So this is according to Google. Back in 1994, maybe you've heard of this guy, Rod Stewart. I'm kidding, of course. I'm sure you've probably heard of Rod Stewart.
Oh, yeah.
So they have a record number of 3.5 million people. They have as the record for the largest rock concert in history. So I Googled that. Like I said, 3.5 million people. So let that sink in for a second as a musician. Okay. So imagine this, right? You're on stage, 3.5 million people, which is crazy to think about. And everybody's screaming your name and singing your songs. What would that feel like?
Oh my gosh. I think that would just be one of the most overwhelming experiences of my entire life. Like if I was in that position, I don't know if I'd be able to get any words out. I would just be so overcome by the massiveness of it, and like the spectacle of something like that. It'd also probably be really emotional, just to think of like, wow, like really at the end of the day, I'm just a normal guy who happens to make music, and there's something in the music that other people connect with, and that thread is what has brought everybody together for this. And so that in itself would also be overwhelming, that wow, something that I have to say resonates with so many people and they want to be here for this. It would just, I think I would just be overwhelmed on a few different levels.
I mean, because I'm thinking about, the Franklin Graham event that you're talking about. I mean, that draws a crowd, right? I mean, that obviously draws a crowd. But I'm just thinking, man, to have that opportunity to stand in front of, perform in front of, 3.5 million people. I mean, that's just mind-boggling to me. And I'm thinking to myself, you walk off that stage, I mean, where's your identity? Where's your vision in that? I mean, do you think any of that would be put to the test?
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I definitely think that ego would have a huge part to play in, my opinion of myself or my opinion of what we're doing. And I can't imagine being in a position like that, kind of having a little bit of an identity crisis, because you almost become this caricature of who you are. You know what I mean? I don't know Rod Stewart, but I've had the privilege to be around a lot of influential people, both inside of Christian music and outside. And at the end of the day, a lot of the people that have, great success are really down to earth, and I think there's a tension that they fight. And my band never got huge, or was never a huge band, but we still kind of had a little bit of that tension when we had success. And that was kind of some of the struggle I was talking about earlier, about you know being defined by what we did as opposed to who we actually are. Like Andrew, a son, a brother, a cousin, a follower of Christ. Like those are the things that actually we should find our identity in. But we oftentimes get so tied up in the thing or the what. And in some ways it can be a good thing, but in other ways it can be a bad thing. And I honestly, like, I couldn't even begin to fathom what that would look like in that kind of an environment. It would just be, yeah, it would be insane. It'd be crazy to be in that guy's shoes, for sure.
I like the plug there, especially in that guy's shoes. That was nice. I like how you tied that in. But
but I didn't even realize.
Yeah, it's okay. Nobody does, but it just works out, which we love. But my whole thing is right, this identity. And I'm not expecting you to like name drop or anything like that, or divulge, tour secrets or, tour conversations that you've had. But I mean, let's face it, you've toured with some big names in Christian music. I'm curious if you ever encountered others maybe struggling with their identity or who they are. And, I love how you said, that's not my identity as a brother. That is my identity. It's this, it's not that. Do you think there are other Christian artists that have struggled with that?
Oh my word. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
How so?
Well,
and again, not name dropping. I mean, I'm not expecting you to be like, well, so-and-so said to me, and, by any means, not going there, but.
Yeah. And so there's one artist who I will not name that I've spent time with over the years, who just really struggled with really their place in the world, and feeling this drive that the Holy Spirit had put on their heart to do this thing. And, really had a sense of promise from the Lord that, this was the path that God had for their life. And every time, something good would become of their career, or something that might move the ball down the field, so to speak, something else equally as not awesome would also happen. And so there's kind of this back and forth of, take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And this person had a lot of people, in the music industry saying, hey, like, you've got great songs, you've got this and you've got that, but you'll never make it because you don't have the look, or maybe you're too old. And so this person living in that tension of saying, well, like, I have this calling, or this path that I really truly believe that God has put me on, and there's some good things going for me, there's some things working for me, but then I have kind of the gatekeepers of the industry saying, well, no, that's not going to actually be the case. Maybe you should focus on doing this or doing that. And so even to this day, I know this person struggles with that. And when that's your life, and you also have to support your family and do whatever it takes to take care of them, because they're your number one priority, you can almost have some sort of an identity complex, because you're having success, but you're not having success, and you have this leading from God, and you're starting to see things move in that sense. But then you have the world and the people who control the world that you're in saying, well, that's not actually the thing. So, where is your identity? Where does it lie? What's the anchor? And just living in the tension of that, and not swinging too far one way or the other, I know is an ongoing struggle for this person. And my heart really goes out to them, and I think about them and pray for them often in that, because I too see what God's doing, but I worry about all the other details, and just their personality and their makeup, and how are they gonna fight through this. But ultimately for me, kind of being on the sidelines and being a cheerleader, I know that, God definitely has a trajectory, and, where God leads and the doors that God opens, no man can shut. So really just trying to encourage this person to recenter their life on God, and walk in the way that he's leading, and don't be, uh, influenced one way or the other by what man says. Um, so I think that would be one example, without giving too much away.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not looking for you to name drop or break confidence or anything like that. I just know that I would imagine that somebody when they get to that stage of their career, or that pinnacle, that there probably is some identity, lack of a better wording, identity crisis that perhaps goes on. So I'm curious about this too, Andrew. How are you pursuing this vision of being in a band? How is that let me restate that. How in pursuing your vision in your band, how has that shaped your identity?
Well, I think that over the course of time, God has really used the vehicle of my band and the projects that I'm involved with to actually bring me full circle back to how he wants me to identify myself. And, I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, where, early on, in early onsets of some success, really finding myself thinking I'm Andrew, the singer, the guitar player, the front man of this band. And everybody who knows me as that. There's a lot more people who know me than I know. And this is what they know me by. And you can buy into that lie that you are, all that in a bag of chips, because your identity and your makeup becomes, what you're doing. And I think as guys, I think that we all struggle with that, whether we're performing musicians, or we've got a great career, and we're kind of defined by what it is that we do, and we can lose sight of who God actually says that we are, because we become so wrapped up in that thing, in that what, that at some point it can become a stumbling block. And that moment definitely happened for me. And it was in that time that God says, okay, this is, where you're at, but I want to actually show you who you are. And that is, you're my son. You're a follower of Jesus, and you're, again, a son, a husband, a brother, a father now. And I want you to be grounded in these things, because I say that you've been made new and made clean, and I see you as a child, an adopted child, and then everything else is secondary to that. And so for me, it's been just a long kind of growing up process of discovering who I actually am, and that is finally living in the freedom of who the Lord says I am, and that is a forgiven follower of Christ, and then everything else comes after that. Does that answer your question?
No, I think it does 100%. And I loved you Garrett's applauding in the background. I love it. And it's not often Garrett engages sometimes, but he did engage on that one. So is that really how you define yourself then? Is based on who you are in Christ rather than who you are on stage, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely, throughout the last season, I would say the last year of my life, that's more true than ever. And in fact, it's so fresh and new for me that it's a constant reminder every single day that I'm not defined by what I do. I'm defined by Him. Just because there's been some struggle, and there's been some tension and change, within the things that I'm doing and the people that I'm involved with over the last 12 months. And a lot of just questions, seasons, and then God takes you out of that and there's no closure, and you kind of can get caught in this whirlwind of like, well, who am I? What am I? Where am I? And God has really used that, in addition to my experience with the Incandescent, to bring me to this point of being centered and finding my peace and my foundation in Him, and then restructuring life off of that. And it's really interesting because my wife and I have kind of had some of these conversations recently, and she's just been amazing to bounce these ideas and concepts off of, because I don't think anybody is quite as honest with you as your spouse can be, and sometimes it can hurt, but it's always generally said with love when it's coming for her, and she's helped me kind of walk through some of these things and help me realize who I am, and that's the crux of kind of what I just said.
I love that you're giving your wife credit, right? Isn't that awesome that you have a helpmate now? Because back when I met you, I mean, maybe she was on the radar, maybe she wasn't, but I'm so happy to hear that you have that helpmate to come alongside you to kind of round out those edges in a Holy Spirit type moment, I'm sure, because sometimes I confuse the Holy Spirit and my wife. They're very similar in a lot of respects. It's
yes,
like,
absolutely.
was that the Holy Spirit, or was that you, honey? Or honey, was that so that's awesome that you have that now. So that's such a great blessing. So, Andrew, I know the band, obviously it takes money to run the band, equipment, travel expenses, things of that nature. But what did it really cost the band, and maybe you personally being out on the road? I know money is obviously a factor into that, so we'll eliminate that from the equation. But what did it cost you guys?
Relationships, and not like the boyfriend girlfriend breakup kind of thing, but just the relationship and the community that you have with people. We were so busy and so preoccupied moving the ball down the field with our band that things really just kind of suffered at home. For most of the lifetime of our band, our guitarist Ryan, he was a dad and a father, and so as well as Colin and Zach. Now that I think about it, and so in this pursuit of trying to make it or to get to the next level, it just took time away from our families, and it took time away from our church communities. And I think that's the biggest sacrifice. Money, logistics and expenses and all that stuff aside, relationship and community with our loved ones and just our folks back at home was the biggest cost in everything. And I just remember having moments of being on the road or being at a rehearsal and looking at Facebook on my phone and seeing so-and-so got married and I wasn't able to be at their wedding, or so-and-so just had a kid and, I'm not there to welcome, that new kid into the world, and just feeling like life is just passing us by as we're doing this thing. And I think that would be the number one thing that was a cost or an expense because of what we were doing.
Do you ever regret any of it?
Some of it, yeah. There's moments. There's definitely moments where I wish my priorities had been different, for sure.
The bad part is of course we can never go backwards. We can only go forwards, right?
Yeah. Yep. That is true. But you know what? God is good. There wasn't any like bad blood or anything that necessarily came out of it. Just more a feeling like time almost is standing still for us in what we're doing, but life is moving on for other people. I can't speak for the other guys in my band.
Right. No, but, you can only speak for you, right? No, I know.
But now being a father, I can only imagine of like, I just have a brand new baby, and then I have to be gone for a week or 2 weeks, and just seeing my daughter now, how she has changed, from 1 week to the next as she's growing, and feeling like you're missing out on those moments, would be really tough. And so I think that would be the biggest thing, aside from, trying to make it work from a financial standpoint. But the amazing thing is, we've been off the road for a little bit now, and God has just kind of brought things back full circle, and the relationships and the community that was there, has kind of started to come back together, and it's been really good. But being in it, those were some of the moments that were the hardest, for sure.
Wow. I mean, that was some heavy stuff, by the way. So thank you again for your vulnerability on that. So we'll change the channel to a little lighter subject, hopefully. Musical influences. I'm curious about this. I know for Dub Fest, you guys did I'm trying to think of who it is now, and it's escaping me. I Won't Back Down. Who sings that, Garrett? Help me out.
Tom Petty.
Tom Petty, thank you.
Yes.
I couldn't think of it. I'm like, why am I drawing a blank on Tom Petty? But I know you guys, maybe that's an influence, but what are some other musical influences?
Yeah, so I think over the lifetime of what we were doing, different influences kind of poke their head in our music at different points. So when we started, the band was originally just a worship project, and so at that time it would be like Jesus Culture. At that time, Hillsong and Lincoln Brewster. Those were definitely kind of heavy influences in what we were doing. But then, as we grew and maybe even discovered cooler music, other guys came into play. Obviously, like Third Day, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Need to Breathe was a huge influence. And then as our band got older, we started becoming a little bit more rock and roll. So, Zeppelin and Tom Petty and Bad Company, things like that started really kind of having an influence on the music itself. Not necessarily the lyrical content, but definitely the music. And it really kind of made a presence. I think, though, if you asked every single person in the band, what one common thread of influence was, it would definitely be Switchfoot, Need to Breathe, and Tom Petty. Those would kind of be the three main influences in our sound.
So did you ever tour with Switchfoot? I didn't know if that was on the list or not. I can't remember if you did or didn't.
No, it was always on our bucket list. We always wanted to at least play one show with those guys. And actually, we did, but we never met them. It was a big festival up in Canada, and we were early in the day, and then they were actually closing out the night. But we never got to meet them or do anything with them. But that would have been a bucket list thing for sure, to play multiple shows with those guys.
Yeah.
They're just amazing.
So another Dub Fest story. They come down with Switchfoot. Switchfoot comes down here, and Lecrae's with them, and somebody else was opening for them. I can't remember who it was, but so John Foreman walks right past me before you do the walk up the ramp to the pavilion, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's John Foreman. If I could just get 5 minutes with John Foreman, what would I give? Because he's so eclectic. Maybe that's not the right word, but he's just so in his head sometimes with his lyrics. And I don't know. I just was curious if you ever toured with those guys, because I was curious how he is off the stage. But you can't really answer that because you never toured with them. So I will skip that question. Garrett's laughing again. So what's one of the lessons that you learned in touring? And I know you've had, obviously we talked about some major influences in who you've toured with, but what is one lesson you learned while touring?
Always pack more underwear than you think you'll need.
That's fantastic. That might be the quote of the day right now. That's fantastic. Garrett's dying. You can maybe hear him. I should turn the microphone around. He is literally dying. Okay. So next question. Can you elaborate on that maybe?
Well, yeah. So, I don't know what people think about when they think of what the touring life of a musician looks like, but it's definitely not as glamorous as you might think it is, especially when you're kind of a C level or a B level band, who's slugging it out in a van and trailer. Because oftentimes you get into a venue, you don't get a dressing room, or if you do for like an outside show, your dressing room is a pop-up canopy, and it's 100+ degrees, and it's just extreme conditions. So you don't necessarily get to shower every day. You don't necessarily get to sleep in a bed every day. And so it's just a grind. And so um, realizing that there's some things that you need to put in place for self-care was a big eye opener as we started making longer and longer runs. I think I forgot the other part of your question.
I just asked to elaborate on that. Maybe, pack more underwear. It was just kind of funny. That's all. And then, was there a story behind it? Did you get out on the road and not have enough, or maybe had to, I don't know. I don't even want to go there. I mean, the reverse in and out. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. You can only, flip those inside and out so many times before everybody starts noticing that there's something not quite right.
Oh, that's funny. That's good stuff. Do you have a favorite artist that you love to tour with more than another?
Yeah, I think for me, my favorite artist that I've ever toured with and done a lot of time with is Toby Mac. And I've been privileged to kind of tour with him in a couple different capacities. Obviously doing shows with him with my band, but then also as road crew and just being around him and his crew. In fact, earlier this year, I think I did 45 or 50 shows with him on the Hits Deep tour, and his entire crew, from band to tour management to catering, like everybody is just so amazing. There's just nothing like it. And he's the real deal. He's just a stellar guy.
So my Toby Mac story, I feel like it's appropriate to share this. I was doing Dub Fest again, and he was late to the venue, and apparently he was golfing over in Bandon. And so there was a chance that he was not even going to be able to do meet and greet, and people were kind of getting a little grouchy about that because he was late. And so I somehow finagled my way into getting to meet him through the promoter of the show, of Dub Fest and all that. And so I got to meet him, and I was like the 6th or 7th person in Medford to meet him that night. And I didn't have anything to sign. I didn't have a picture, didn't have anything to give him to sign. And I remember being very starstruck, to say the least. I could not talk. And I know he's just a dude. I know that deep down in my heart. At least my mind does. My heart doesn't necessarily know that. And I actually stumbled over my words. I said, I think I might have called him Mr. McKeon at first, and then I changed it to Toby, and then I went Toby Mac, and I'm like stumbling again over my words, and I said, can I just share really briefly with you, your Free at Last album changed my life and put me on a trajectory to become a youth pastor, and it's because of your music that I believe I follow God so closely. And he goes, man, that's awesome. Do you mind if I share that with my wife Amanda tonight when I talk to her? And I was like, yes, of course. I mean, no.
Oh, wow.
I mean, yes, of course you can. I'm thinking, like, what do I say next? And he's like, well, do you have anything for me to sign? And I was like, well, could you sign my shoes? Well, Tracy McGrady, who's a basketball player, also goes by the moniker T-Mac, because Tracy McGrady, Mac. Anyway, There's these Adidas that I was wearing, and that's why I love that you were talking about Adidas. So I had T-Mac shoes on, and so he signed the top Velcro part of the shoe, and it has his signature. I've never worn them since he signed them. They actually sit in my studio at home. Garrett is dying,
awesome,
laughing right now. That's my Toby Mac story. So then later that night, I'm doing security, the backside of the stadium, as he's getting ready to go on now, because now it's time for him to go on. As he's walking up the stage, it's pitch black dark. And I said, Toby, one last question before you go on. And people are mad because I'm like holding him up because, Toby's so gracious and generous, as you know.
Yeah.
Probably more than I do. But then he kind of stops and he goes, yeah, what's your question? I said, I got to know this, Duke or North Carolina. And he goes, honestly, both are very good. I like both programs. I really can't decide. I'm like, no. I need to know, though. I need to know. And he goes, I can't choose, but I got to go. But it's nice talking to you. So next time you talk to him, I know he's a little busy right now. He's got a lot of stuff going on, but maybe you could just ask him or somehow send him a message and just so I can sleep better at night knowing which school he would prefer, Duke or North Carolina. So if you could make that happen for me, that'd be great. So that's my Toby Mac story. It's a terrible story. Awesome. Garrett is like, why is this relevant? But it's very relevant, Garrett. So anyway, there we are. So I'm curious, favorite band memory, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on the road or just in general.
Favorite band memory? Gosh, there are so many. When you're with a group of guys for, the amount of time that we've been together, a lot of stuff happens, a lot of weird stuff. You know what? I'm just going to share it. We're going to go. We're going full sail here.
Let's do it.
So we were probably 5 or 6 years into the band and really starting to gain some traction regionally up in the Northwest. And there is, or was, a big Christian music festival up here called Creation Northwest. And we had tried for years and years and years to be a part of that. And eventually, the gatekeepers opened the door and invited us to come on in. But what you need to know is that Creation's kind of been a little bit of a transient festival. It used to be at the Gorge Amphitheater in Washington State for a lot of years, and then they had to move to the Seattle area. But all the way up to the time that they kind of shut things down, it ended up in the Tri-Cities of Washington. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the area, the Tri-Cities are basically like high desert farm country. It gets sweltering hot out there. There's no reprieve from the sun. It's just shake and bake out there. And so we're 5 or 6 years into this, and we're driving like a 1995 Dodge conversion van, and we get to the festival and we play and everything's great. But as we're starting to make our way back home, we get about 40 minutes outside of the Tri-Cities where this is at, and the air conditioner and the fan breaks in our van. And at that point, it's like the hottest day of the year. It's like 105, 106 degrees outside. Sun is just baking down on us, and everything goes out. And we pull over to the side of the road, and we try to do some, fixing, see what we can do to try and provide some relief for ourselves. And nothing's working. And the next thing I know, members of the band start removing articles of clothing. And, a shirt comes off here, some shoes go off there, somebody takes some pants off. And before I know it, everybody but the guy driving the van is kind of all the way down to their boxers. And we're just chilling, but not really, in this van as we're, going 70 miles down the freeway, just kind of all feeling like we're in an easy bake oven. And just the conversation and just the vibe that was going on, even though it kind of sucked being in that predicament, it was just funny being around that group of guys at that moment, experiencing and witnessing that time. It just kind of stands out as a memory that I'll hold on to for forever. Might have been one of those you had to be there moments, but it was funny and endearing all at the same time.
That's funny. But that's what builds a band, right? That builds the camaraderie, that builds the memory, that builds the moment, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And gosh, there's just so much shenanigans that happens on the road. You get 5 guys who are creative, and who might be bored in certain situations, and stuff just happens, and it's hilarious. It's just so funny.
I'm imagining like a never-ending summer camp. That's what I'm imagining.
Yeah.
Am I too?
Yeah,
am
exactly.
I kind of on with that? Maybe.
You are. Yep. And
okay.
There's one faction that pranks the other, and then there's retaliation.
Exactly.
Yep. Absolutely.
Exactly.
100%.
All right. Just checking. Man, that's fun. I should have been in a band. Garrett, we should start a band. No. Garrett says no. We can't start a band. Sorry. All right, so we're going back to what we talked about earlier, the 3.5 million, right? So imagine you're standing, and the band can be with you, or it can be you solo, whichever you prefer. But 3.5 million people standing there ready to hear you sing. What song do you sing?
Wow. That's quite a question.
I know. I thought it was ingenious, really.
Yeah. Man, you know what? If you had asked me this, 2 years, or 3 years ago, my answer might have been different. I guess it kind of depends on the capacity that I'm there. Like, am I there as a Christian artist, or am I there
I'm going to let
as
you interpret that however you want.
okay? So I love the idea of being a Christian artist, and for me from the get go, music has always been the vehicle uh, to usher the gospel forward and push the message of Jesus forward. So honestly, as I'm thinking about this, I would sing a song that's not even my own. I would probably sing "In Christ Alone," because it's the entire picture of the gospel in 4 minutes, and everybody can resonate with that. And if there was a legacy that I would want to leave from the stage, it would be that. So yeah, that would be my answer.
I love that. I love that a lot, actually, because I always wonder about that, like as an artist, and I know you kind of touched on that just a second, but what legacy do you want to leave? What legacy do you hope the Incandescent has left?
Man, at the end of the day, I really hope the legacy that we leave behind us is one where people are inspired and filled with hope that there's something more out there than just the craziness of the world that we live in. And I would want the gospel to be paramount. That would be the legacy. I don't really care if people remember my name or the other guys' names, or even the band name for that matter. But if they're like, oh, what was that one band that sang that one song that might have, changed my heart towards God? That would be the legacy that I would want to leave, is that we left impacting the world for Jesus, whether it was thousands of people or one person. Truly, honestly, that's what I would want.
I like that answer, Andrew. I like it a lot. So last question, then we're going to play a game. And here's the last question. What is the band up to now? I know you guys have, you mentioned your new baby, your marriage. You got a lot of stuff going on personally, but kind of give us a rundown of where you guys are and maybe where you're going to go next.
Sure. Yeah, actually, it's an exciting time to be in our circle. Unofficially, the band is kind of on hiatus as we figure out what we're doing in life. Everybody, all the guys are dads and husbands, so making family the number one priority is the priority. So trying to figure out what music looks like in balance with family life and kind of living in that healthy tension. So technically, we're not doing anything right now, but you can't stop 5 creatives from being creative. So there is music that's being written. There is a record we started recording in Nashville that's still in process, and we do have the desire to see that come to completion, but the timeline on that we don't quite know yet. So yeah, really just trying to figure out what that looks like. And then a few of us actually have solo projects and solo endeavors that we're working on. Not trying to make a run at it on our own, but just for the love of music and having that creative expression, we're working on that. In fact, I actually have an idea that I'm working on and trying to put roots to right now for another band collective kind of thing that I would really, really love to see come to fruition. But all the idea and the concept and some of the things are there, but all of the details aren't quite worked out yet. But I would love to tease, at least from me personally, that something is in the works, kind of solo and in conjunction with some other folks. So
that's awesome. Yeah, tease away. We love teases. We love to tease people too. Garrett, of course, really loves to tease me, but that's another story. So so anyway, we're gonna play this game. We thanks for sharing that, by the way. And if people want to get in touch with you, we'll link some of the band stuff there too, and then we'll get some information from you to put in the show notes if you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Link away.
Great, awesome. So we play this game. I think you said you listened to a couple of shows, which I'm really excited about. So we play this game called Senseless. So you're not here, so I'm going to have to roll for you. And so here we go. Ooh, my favorite question. Yes. You got number 6, which is you get to have dinner with one person, dead or alive. Who would it be?
Oh man.
And they're buying, so, or whoever is buying. So restaurant, you can even pick the restaurant.
Okay, let's think here. That's a hard question. Let's see.
We don't ask easy questions, Andrew.
No, I'm stumped. One person, dead or alive, they're paying.
This is like home group. We're like sitting in silence. Like,
Yeah. Man, I think you're gonna have to edit all this silence out. Man, this is a tough one.
that's okay. We have a good editor, I think.
You know what? I'm just gonna say it. I think that I'm going with my gut. So I think it would be amazing to share Chick-fil-A with Tom Petty and see what that guy is all about. Not the fanciest meal, but I think it'd be cool to have some greasy, the Lord's chicken with Tom Petty. I think that'd be awesome.
What's your number one question you ask him?
How do you come up with so much material? Where's your inspiration? Because that guy's got a catalog, so much stuff.
Yeah, I mean, everybody thinks of Free Falling, Last Dance with Mary Jane, that's what I'm thinking of. And of course I Won't Back Down, now I remember Tom Petty, I can quote all these songs. Look at me go. Thank you, Garrett, for helping with some of those. But I think that's interesting too, right? To one lyricist to another, one songwriter to another, to have that, one-on-one interaction, to really see, kind of where he's getting his inspiration and maybe borrow a little bit of that, I would think. Yeah?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I think about that all the time because I cannot sing to save my life, and I'm so glad my life does not depend on my ability to sing because it would be gone. But I do think of, artists that you've toured with, the Mac Powells of the world, the Toby Macs, even you guys, even Matthew West. And I've heard rumors in concert, he literally stops his concert and will have people shout out things, objects or whatever, or things, and he writes a song right there on the stage with what they shout out. And it's awesome. It's not like this like hokey song. I mean, maybe sometimes it's hokey, but he does that. And I'm just like, that is incredibly God-given talent that people have that ability. And to me, it's still mind-boggling to me on that. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, totally. That would definitely be the crux of it. Just like where's your source of inspiration? How do you pull all these ideas and concepts together and come up with such a vast, deep discography of awesome music that inspired an entire generation? Like Tom Petty's music is, I'm going to sound like a huge fanboy, but
That's okay.
it
I
kind
did
of,
Toby Mac, so you're good.
it really just kind of spans generations. Like you hear songs that were recorded in the 70s, 60s, 80s, and they still stand up today. And I think it kind of all boils down to the fact that like good music isn't necessarily the chords or the production of it. It always comes back down to the lyric, and that's what connects with people. And so I love those timeless songs. And of course there's dozens of other artists that are the same way, but that would be the question, like how, like where, and how do you continue to go forward and move this thing down the field? So yeah, that would be it.
I like it. I like it a lot. So Andrew, final thought. What would you like to leave us with?
I would like to leave you guys by saying, this whole conversation, I think, has kind of had a central point, and that is, the identity. And, I'm sure there's people who, ascribe to Jesus's teaching and call themselves Christians that listen to the show, and probably others who don't. The thing I would want you guys to leave with is just knowing that if there's one relationship that you can have in your life that will transform you in ways that you don't even know, it would be a relationship with him. And if you are struggling with your identity, or if you're struggling with an addiction or obsession, or you're just in a rut or a bad place, or culture's got you down, having a relationship with Jesus Christ and letting him speak the truth of who you are because of what he did for you in your life will be the most transformational thing that could ever happen to you. So that's what I would want people to walk away with from hearing this thing.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So that's really awesome that you were able to come on and share that, Andrew. Thank you so much. We'll end with that. My guest today, Andrew, from the Incandescent, vocalist, guitarist, Tom Petty fan, right? That was so cool to hear. So we just want to leave you with that. And remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Stay tuned for next week when we get into someone else's shoes. Thank you again.
The undiscovered, the reckless youth, the rebel song that's reaching out, reaching out. The undiscovered, the reckless youth, the rebel song that's reaching out.
Thank you so much for joining us on Other People's Shoes. Of course, you know I'm your host, Neil Matthews. I want to thank my guest, Andrew. I really love his perspective on being a musical artist and what that has done to his vision, how that shaped his identity, and obviously along the way there was a great cost to him. Andrew gave so much perspective today. It was just hard to settle on one particular thing, but really the whole episode for me was just awesome to be a part of that and to share that with you. Stay tuned next week. We have a special guest for you, and here's a sneak preview of that.
I'm going to go back to my word of 2020, being intentional.
Okay.
Intentional, like we all set goals for ourselves and then we just kind of let it like go by the wayside. We say we want to be honest, loving, caring people, and then the next day we're screaming out our car window at the person's, in front of us that took 2 seconds to get past the red light. Like all these things, that's not intentionality, that's not authenticity, and we are not being good humans.
I cannot wait for you to hear that episode. We're going to sit with a good friend of mine. Her name is Jen, and Jen is probably one of the most driven people I've ever met and ever encountered. Can't wait to share that with you next week. If you'd like to hear past, present, or future episodes of our podcast, that can be done at opspodcast.com. That is, of course, a great place to maybe bookmark on your browser or bookmark on your phone. That's where past, present, and future episodes will be. Other People's Shoes is a non-profit organization, so we, of course, would love to receive and graciously accept a gift on your behalf. That, of course, is a tax-deductible donation if you'd like to do that. We've linked our PayPal information down below for you to do that if you so desire. If you have questions or feedback about the show that you'd like to give us, you can, of course, call or text our hotline, and that can be done at 203-548-7463. That's 203-548-7463. On all the social medias that we love and care about, that, of course, being Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. They are all under the name OPS Podcast Show. So, made it easy for you there. And remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. On behalf of Garrett and myself, look forward to trying on other people's shoes next week. Hope you have a great week. Thank you so much for listening.